Okay. So moving on, I'm just going to give a few additional updates, starting with one of the end of the year program statistics, which is taking a look at the registered telemetry systems on the subslab depressurization systems, or active exposure pathway mitigation measures. We've been tracking this over time, and you know, the last couple of years looks to be pretty much on pace with what we were seeing previously. And we're not seeing any slowdown in terms of having, you know, saturated all the sites that have these AEPMMs and telemetry systems. The orange represents the number of sites, or RTNs, and the blue bar are the number of devices monitored. And on average, there are 2+ systems out there for every site, monitoring different components of the system, or maybe multiple systems related to one disposal site. And I wanted to include that chart as a way of just highlighting that we will be sending out shortly the certifications letters, the so-called annual certification letters, to those property owners that have AEPMMs operating in support of a permanent solution. There are 37 of those. So just to let you know, those letters will be going out in case you hear anything from your clients. Most of the people in that group have received this letter before, so they should know what that is. But these letters are being sent out, and the recipient of the letter has to certify that the system continues to be up and running, that they have the wherewithal to repair the system if necessary, that they understand that should the system shut down, they need to make a notification within 30 days to us. All of the same conditions that are outlined as part of the activity and use limitation associated with these systems are what they provide the certification to in these letters that they send back to us. And I just want to mention that that's separate from the activity and use limitation compliance reminder letter that we sent out last year. So we had held back on sending that letter to those property owners just to avoid confusion, and following up with this AEPMM certification letter at this point. In terms of the status of the MCP amendments, we're still moving forward and on track to have it published this fall. We're in the final review process on the document. We are going to start beginning to plan the training that will be associated with implementing the amendments. We expect there will be several hours of training, and there will be DEP credit attached to that training. So we're likely to try to start that toward the beginning of the winter this year and into next year. And we'll be providing Q&As that highlight the new amendments and the implications of the amendments, as well as updating related guidance, in particular the activity and use limitation guidance and the risk characterization guidance are the priorities with respect to the amendments. And I just wanted to include this slide into the slides for this meeting so people can refer back to it. I borrowed this from Paul from his LSPA presentation, but because I was impressed that he managed to summarize the majority of the more significant changes of the package on this one slide. We will expect to also in January, when we come back and meet again with this committee, to do an additional summary of the changes at that point. And one final update reminder, we talked about this in June. but I want to remind you because it goes into effect before we'll meet again, is that the updates to the CAM protocols associated with the 8260 and 8270 methods are going into effect on November 5th. This is primarily of interest to the laboratories, but you may also, if you're submitting samples to lab, check with them to ensure that they are aware of the updates going into effect if you're seeking to have the analytical package meet the presumptive certainty requirements of the CAM. They will need to be using the quality control requirements, the updated quality control requirements after that date. Are there any questions on that before I hand it back to Paul?
Okay. Anything from the advisory committee? We do have 2 hands raised in the attendees. So Lisa Camp, if you want to unmute, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a quick question about the AEPMMs, Liz.
Yeah.
I think we talked about this, I don't know, maybe half a year ago at this point. I don't really remember, but especially with the advent of probably having more private wells impacted by PFAS in the future as part of site discovery, and needing maybe things like POETs if they can't be hooked up to public water supplies for whatever reason, if they don't exist, for example. Is DEP going to be issuing some guidance for AEPMMs such as POETs that are not geared to vapor intrusion mitigation, but rather drinking water ingestion mitigation? Because there's really not anything, in the AUL guidance, nor things like, will telemetry be required? And if so, what would that look like?
Well, I can see us at least doing some Q&As on that. There is some more in terms of specifics going into the amendments related to those systems. They won't require telemetry. We realized that after the 2014 amendments that just wasn't going to be a thing that could be implemented with the private well systems, but instead it calls for having a regimen for sampling and changing out the canisters, a schedule for that. That's part of the permit solution statement, and following that and documenting that. So there will be some specifics in the regulations, and those will also be reflected in the activity and use limitation that supports any of those if they were supporting a permit solution.
Like as part of the obligations and conditions or something in the
yes.
Okay. Great, thank you so much.
Sure.
And if anybody can figure out telemetry for a POET system.
I was trying to, Paul.
but in the absence of that, we a more practical approach would be appropriate. The intent would be to make sure that people are aware about the ongoing obligation to have treatment on that water.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other advisory committee members on that? Okay. Well,